Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Sky's the Limit Podcast. I'm your host, and today we have a guest, Gino Barbaro, who's an investor. I met Gino back with his brother Marco when they do an entrepreneurial coaching mastermind that we'll get into. But Gino is a certified money coach, entrepreneur, and podcast host, which I can appreciate. As an entrepreneur, he's actually grown his portfolio to over 1,800 units in the multifamily space, 450 million in assets under management, and most recently started Barbaro 360, which is a platform that talks about family, life, finance, and helping others create relationships with their money. And it's really about teaching money. So with that, Gino's got a wealth of experience, and I'm very happy to have him on the show. Gino, welcome.
Thanks, Mike, for having me on. And I have a wealth of experience and a wealth of scars to boot with wealth of experience. So hopefully we can dive into some of that as well.
Yeah. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself, where you guys are from, where you're from, and how you got to where you're at today? Because I think that's what a lot of the listeners, want to try to understand is, a lot of people are working in a W-2 job, or maybe just have a unit, and it's like, how do you grow to 1,800 units? How do you get from A to B in the quickest, easiest way? And nothing's easy, as we know, but just kind of create a timeline for me. So where you were and where you are now.
When I go into the history, I always like to start off by saying that I had two parents that were immigrants. They came from Italy. So I learned early on hard work, discipline, family were really the values that were espoused in my household. And I unconsciously just started to adhere to those values. I went to work with my dad when I was 8 years old. He had a restaurant. I graduated college. Weird thing. We opened the restaurant about a year after I graduated college. And I see the storyline through my life, the patterns and the behaviors and the beliefs that I adopted from my family, which a lot of them were really excellent. They were really good beliefs, but there were some that weren't so great. In 2007, my dad passed away. And I, at that point, said to myself, am I living my life and my dreams, or am I living his dreams? And part of me really, Mike, was really, I really mad at that question because I loved working with him. I loved working with the family. But '08 came around and everything changed. The whole business environment changed. And I saw that one stream of income, that one quote unquote job, because it was a job, it was one restaurant, wasn't going to be able to support my brother, myself, and my mom. I struck out and I said, I love real estate. I made a bunch of mistakes in real estate, but how do I learn this thing? You can either learn on the street or you can learn in the classroom. I decided learning on the street was already too expensive and it took too much time. I went and found mentors. I spent a ton of money on my education, on mentorship. I fortunately met my business partner, Jake, in 2009. He was a pharmaceutical rep that was taking orders out of my restaurant, going to doctors' offices and selling them legal drugs. He got fed up with that. I got fed up with the restaurant. We partnered together in 2011. He decided to move down to Knoxville, Tennessee, and we started looking for properties. And after 18 long, grueling, painful, scary months, we finally closed our first deal, the 25-unit deal. And the irony was it took us 3 months to close our second deal. Why so long for the first? And why so quick for the second? I think we'll probably jump into that. But after the second, 6 months later, we closed our third deal. And you had said, hey, what's the quickest way to get to it? I don't think speed should even be a factor, because I think what most people end up doing is they end up overestimating what they can do in 1 year and totally underestimating what they can do in 5 or 10 years. And the same thing happened to me. I was so focused on my yearly goals that it took me 18 months to close that first deal. So that would have been a failure. But if I look at the 5-year horizon with Jake, when I first started from 2011 to 2016, we closed almost 700 units in that time period. So when you're planning goals, don't be afraid or don't be disappointed if the result, aka the goal, is not hit in year one. Give yourself some time and some grace to go and hit that goal, even if it's going to take you a little bit longer.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I think, and I'm sure you talk a lot about this. People have, different theories about, what they want. I think you have to start and figure out as a new investor, where do you want to go? Maybe you love your
Mhm.
W-2 job and you love what you do. You just want
Yes.
to diversify your income. And so for you, it's not quitting what you're doing and going all in on real estate. It's just, how do I acquire a couple units each year to, for maybe for tax benefits. Maybe you're a high W-2 income earner and you want to go the short-term rental route because you can offset that active income with your active W-2 income with active short-term rental income. And there's so many different paths in real estate you can go, but I think you need to have like a deeper internal thought and conversation with yourself to see where you want to go. For you guys, it made sense you're at 1,800 units now, so you went all in on real estate, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for everyone. So talk to me about what you're doing now. Talk to me about your Barbaro 360 platform. I know you guys had Jake and Gino, which was like a mastermind community. You've since sold that. So what is Barbaro 360 and what's the goal of it?
Mike, I just want to add to what you just said, and then I'll talk a little bit about Barbaro 360. But what you said was so important. You sort of glossed over it, and most people don't think about it. It's really what I consider the word legacy. We're setting something in motion. Well, when you're setting something in motion, not everyone aspires to the same things. And what happens when people don't take action, it's not because they're not motivated. It's because they don't have the clarity. They lack the clarity. They lack the game plan. I knew that when I met Jake that eventually real estate was going to be my full-time gig. I knew that I couldn't fix and flip because I already had a job and I didn't want to have more taxable events. I didn't want to have that get the goose, get the egg, then kill the goose, rinse, repeat. I didn't want that. If you're out there, like Mike said, and you're a high income earner, possibly investing in syndications, possibly putting some money aside and partnering up with somebody else, you don't have to do this business alone. That's important. By starting out, by thinking clearly and understanding what your goals are is so important. The second thing that I would say is always look at real estate as a business, not only an investment. So if you're going to buy 1 or 2 homes a year, that is awesome. Don't think of it as a side hustle. Don't treat it as a side hustle, because if you buy 1 to 2 homes a year, in the next 5 years, you'll have 10 homes that are paying you every month or every quarter, and they will be appreciating in value. The debt will be deflating. The debt you're paying back dollars in debt that are cheaper. You'll be getting tax benefits. And that's the problem. We see it linearly. We see ourselves as, oh, we're doing it today, but I can't see myself in 5 years. Just treat your investing as a business and understand that you need to really create a financial foundation. It's all about financial independence, and your W-2 job, you may love it, but at one point, my goal for anybody listening to this is I want them to have the autonomy or the option to finally say one day, I'm sick of the boss. I want to get rid of my boss. And if you have that, that is what I call happy money, happy family, happy legacy. I wrote the book about that. It's having the choice to do that, not being backed into a corner like I was in 2008 and trying to figure it out and saying, well, what's my next step? If I had planned more properly and I had understood, hey, here's this amazing vehicle in real estate. Let me get into this vehicle. Let me choose a vehicle that's really great for my relationship with money, from my psychology. I didn't want to do 30 or 40 transactions a year. I wanted to do a couple really solid, good transactions that I could hold for the long term. I knew what my legacy was. As Stephen Covey says, start with the end in mind. And if you can start with your end in mind and know what you want to accomplish in the next 10 years, then you know possibly where to start. And that may be, let's start with wholesaling. I just need to build up some equity. I don't have any money to invest. Wholesaling would be great. Jump in that vehicle, make some transactions, create some equity, save that equity, and then possibly buy some single family homes or get into multifamily or whatever that is. That's so important that you said that. And I just want to reiterate that, because that is the clarity. Once you have the map, once you have the vision, once you're able to see the shoreline of where you're going, because if it gets cloudy, all of a sudden we may quit. But if you have the shoreline and you know where you're going, you'll be more motivated and you'll have the clarity to get there. So that's really important. Now,
100%.
as far as Barbaro 360, we sold the Jake and Gino platform back in January of this year, and I just got sick and tired of coaching real estate. It just got boring to me. I would have some students that came on that had this amazing success that shouldn't be closing deals. I'm like, this person is 24 years old. They have no balance sheet. They have no equity, but yet they just closed the deal. And then I have these older students who have all the success in the world. They've got the balance sheet. They've got the experience, and they're not closing deals. And I'm like, what's the difference between these two? I want to learn what the difference is. And I understood that it was the relationship that each individual has about money, whether it's their limiting beliefs, their patterns, their behaviors, what you were talking about. And once I understood that, it led me to money coaching. It led me to the psychology of money, the behaviors that we have towards money. That person who is closing deals just has a different way of looking at money. I think that person realizes that money is just a result. That person realizes that he or she is creating value, whether it's for themselves, whether it's for the residents that are living in their apartments, whether it's for the investors that they have. They understand that it's not just for them; it's that they're creating value. Whereas the person who is just looking for themselves and looking to do a deal and not clear, and are they sure, and is there too much risk? And my uncle told me that it's really risky. That person has different behaviors and different beliefs. And when you start blending that in and looking at each individual holistically and seeing where they came from and what behaviors and patterns they have, and just exploring those patterns and behaviors, everything starts to change. And you start to I don't use the word diagnose, but you start to see the patterns that you've had, the patterns that held me back, such as it takes money to make money. Money doesn't grow on trees. You've got to save for a rainy day. These are a lot of the beliefs that I had early on that were holding me back. And then when I started investing in real estate, like I had said, I had one restaurant for 20 years. I couldn't scale that business. Why? Now I know why. But within 5 years, this pizza guy and this drug rep have 1,000 units. That makes absolutely no sense unless you look at it through the lens of money coaching and a person's relationship with money.
Yeah, it's really good. What got me started was probably what got a lot of other people started was, and he talks about it a lot in his book, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, in the
Hmm.
four quadrants.
Yes.
And that really, when you read that book, and I would urge all the listeners, if you haven't read that book, that should be one of the first books you read if you want to get started in real estate investing. But it really teaches you your relationship with money, and I'm sure you talk a lot about that. If you could give one tip from whatever you normally talk about in your teachings about someone's relationship with money, what would you suggest or what would you say?
I
I'm
would
sure there's
say
a lot.
I would say the vast majority of us. I'm going to start. I'll ask you a couple of questions, but I
Yeah.
think the vast majority of us, from people that I've spoken to, including myself, my family, have some type of shame around money. We have some type of fear or anxiety around money. And when you have shame or fear or anxiety around money, is it going to be hard to actually attract that money? And if you do attract that money, are you going to keep that money? It's very interesting. And I look back at it as what we call money traumas. When you're a little child, you're going to the store with your parents, and your mom says, Gino, we can't afford it. We'll buy it later. The 5-year-old doesn't understand that. As I grow older, all of a sudden I start seeing things in life that are scarce. Mom says we couldn't afford it. Something to the effect of going to the grocery store, not having enough money to buy for food. Now all of a sudden you're adult in your 30s and 40s making six figures. You obviously can afford these things, but your behaviors and your patterns that you adopted early on are telling you unconsciously, no, you can't. And if you don't understand those traumas and start to look at those traumas, put a flashlight on those traumas and start to heal from those traumas, it's like, wow, man, it's like, it becomes life changing, to be honest with you. And, for you, can you think of your earliest memory around money? Some people are like, I don't really remember. It's maybe they don't want to remember, but mine was going to the store with my grandmother when we were 5 years old. I wanted to buy these toy soldiers. And she, in her Italian accent, says, Tesoro, honey, we don't have the money to buy these. When your mom comes back, we'll go back to the store and buy them. So as a 5-year-old, I left that store not buying those soldiers. I don't even remember if we ever went back. I just remember saying to myself as I got older, if I don't do this thing, if I don't buy this thing may be gone. I mean, it may never be able to get another chance. And that's not a good thing if you're a real estate investor. If you don't understand that pattern, all of a sudden the deal comes along. You may overpay the deal. You may buy the deal because you don't want to miss out on the deal. You might get FOMO. Not understanding that can be really detrimental, and not understanding that it's unconscious that you're taking that behavior because you don't know why. It can all be traced back to when you were younger. Can you think of a pattern, a belief, something that happened to you around money? Talking to your family, maybe not even talking about money. That happens a lot of times in families. Families don't talk about money, and all of a sudden we're adults and we avoid it. We're afraid of it.
Yeah.
Rich people are
Um,
evil.
Sure, yeah. One memory comes to mind playing baseball, literally growing up. Everyone, all these new bats are coming out, and I really wanted this bat. And it was maybe like $250. You couldn't afford it at the time, so I didn't get it. Got the older model, but I'll never forget always wanting that bat. Didn't come from money, but got everything that we needed to, and had a great childhood growing up. So no complaints
Mike,
there.
but
But
stop for a
the
second. That
bat,
you cross over. You sort of we sort of blow over these things. I don't think it was the bat that you wanted. I think it was that everyone else had it, and you wanted to be part of everyone else, part of being in the group, right?
or it can
That's the
make me play
crazy
better.
part.
Yeah, thinking it can make me play better, right?
Yes, but you wanted it, and then when you couldn't get it, all of a sudden in your life, as you get older now, and you're older, you may say to yourself, "Well, I really want this thing. It's really too expensive. I don't really need it," But at the same time, you're making decisions based on that little kid who couldn't afford that bat, or who. But everything else is great. Childhood was great, and that's what we do. We like to minimize and say, "Oh, childhood, my childhood was great too." But I had a lot of money traumas that I've put upon my family right now and my children. I'll give you a quick example. When my 18-year-old, she was talking about a memory that she had when she was 6 or 7 years old. We all went to Gymboree. I've got 6 kids. So at the time, there's 4 of them. They've got a bunch of clothes on the counter. She comes over with a pair of pajamas. She puts it on the counter. And I must have looked at her and made a, really? And she remembers that to this day that, wow, dad made this face. Am I worthy? Do I deserve these pajamas? So now as an adult, she made this connection that when she goes online, sometimes she has this like little fear or this anxiety of, should I buy this thing? And that's just a 6-year-old little girl that's emanating, that's coming out of her saying, well, dad did this to me when I was little, and did I deserve that? And it's us as parents, we don't even know. I was having a stressful day that day. You go to Gymboree with 4 kids, you're $500 in the hole. It's like another pair of pajamas. It's not that I didn't want to. I just made that face and was like, yeah, anyway, let's buy it. But at the same time, I want anybody listening to this who has children, or more importantly, even with your spouse, you and your spouse come into the relationship with different money histories. One spouse may love to spend money, and one spouse may hate spending money. It's not the money that causes the problem. It's the underlying patterns or behaviors or beliefs that are really the cause of the problem. Money is just the symptom. We always love to blame money, but it's not the money, it's the symptom. And once you start having these conversations with your spouse, trying to understand where they're coming from, what happened to them, what kind of traumas happened to them. Can you imagine? My wife was she grew up in a single household, single family household, 3 siblings. Her mom worked 2 jobs. They thought money was evil. Rich people were evil. They were living week to week. They never talked about goals. They never talked about investing. Then she comes to my tribe, to my side of the ledger. We get married. I've got a business. We talk about saving. We talk about investing. We talk about building a house. These are all foreign things to her. And all of a sudden, she feels that shame of, well, why am I getting all this stuff while my family really doesn't talk about money? And all of a sudden, she starts develop these patterns and these feelings of shame as well. And if you don't have these conversations, these feelings will continue to go on. And then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 years down the road, I want to save all this money, and she needs to spend money for braces or for whatever. And I am the one that's really being a tyrant and saying, no, we can't afford it. And then all of a sudden, that's where the arguments start. It's really an
Mhm.
incredible thing to be able to sit down and have these conversations with your spouse right now. Don't wait.
Right, right, right. No, it's great. I think one thing I live in my life, and I think it applies to money, I think it applies to everything, lifestyle choices, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
is I'm really a big proponent of everything in moderation. So
Mm-hmm.
whether that's, maybe, people talk about diets they go on, or they talk about saving, saving, saving. Um, at the end of the day, you need to live. If you want to go and you can afford it, and you want to go buy yourself a nice watch, because maybe when you go to the office, it makes you think, I'm going to work even harder now to afford that watch, or
Mm-hmm.
um, you know diets, for example. Everyone goes on some crazy diets, carnivore diets, and all the social media diets. But if you just once you accomplish that, you always revert back to your
Yes.
normal lifestyle. So if you just take everything in moderation, right? Have some nice things, be sparing in other ways. Same thing with money, same thing with relationships. I think everything in moderation is a really good mantra to go by. It's worked
Mike,
well.
What you're talking about, though, is you're talking about adopting an identity. The
Yeah.
problem is the person who's heavy, that goes on a diet and loses weight, they never unconsciously lose that identity of being a fat person or a healthy person. And I'll give you the perfect example of myself. When I started this real estate thing, I was the pizza guy. There was a few deals before I became the multifamily investor. My identity was so tied into the restaurant for years and so tied into being the person in Mayapack, having the Italian restaurant and the family and homeschooling, that once I understood that if I really want to become successful in multifamily, I need to start identifying as a multifamily investor. And whatever you want to identify as, you need to start taking the actions of that person. So for me, it was underwriting deals, talking to brokers, talking to investors, not being embarrassed or afraid of, hey, this is who I am now. And if you don't identify as the multifamily investor, then you're less likely to create goals. You're less likely to call brokers. You're less likely to underwrite deals. All these actions won't be taken because you're reverting back to the safe real restaurant guy. So you need to understand that that identity is so important, and we can adopt it at any time we want. But once again, if your pattern of money is being afraid, being shameful, and if you get some money, all of a sudden you may become that person, then are you going to adopt the identity of the multifamily guy or the real estate guy? Probably not. And then if you
Right.
don't adopt that, you're not going to be closing deals, because multifamily investors, they close deals. That's the big difference. And one last thing I'll say about money, and I want
Mhm.
everyone to really reflect upon this. I truly believe money does not corrupt a person; it just reveals a person. So
Hmm.
if you're a great person and you've got a ton of money and you want to help the world, it's going to reveal that in the way you spend money, the way you use money. And conversely, if you're a terrible person, if you're a greedy person, if you're an evil person, it's not going to corrupt you. It's just going to reveal those tendencies. So don't think that money will change you one way or another. I think personally, it's just going to amplify you who you are.
Yeah. So now, would you say that you? I think there's two trains of thought. There's like the David Ramsey thought, where save, 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 pay down all your debts, or the other thought, which is probably where you and I fall, which is I'm going to, instead of paying down my home mortgage, which is at a 3% interest rate, instead of paying
Yes.
that down, I'm going to use any additional money to go buy other assets and have that money work for me.
Mm.
Right. Let's
Hmm.
say I want to go buy a new sports car that's going to cost me $700 a month. And let's say I can afford it. Great. I'm not going to go buy that sports car. Instead, I'm going to go buy an asset like a three family that's going to
Hmm.
cash flow me $700 a month. And now I'm having my assets pay for my liabilities.
Hmm.
Right. I don't think I think most people agree that's probably a smarter thing to do. But then there's the others that say, you know what, I sleep way better at night, because I have no debt. I'm no debt. Yeah, maybe I don't, maybe my house is paid off, but that's the only house I own. I'm
Hmm.
the complete opposite. I'd rather have multiple assets. Maybe I don't want to be highly leveraged. I'm not saying do that, but I'm saying have your money work for you.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's talked about enough.
Michael, I would bring it back to what you said earlier. There's a couple thoughts to this, and it's very important. You need to understand what your goals are, not what Dave Ramsey wants for you, not what Gino wants for you, or not what Michael wants for you. If you want to build a sustaining business, if you want to create an amazing legacy, Dave Ramsey's plan is a lot slower. I think
Hmm.
Dave Ramsey's plan worked for somebody who's financially unintelligent. If you don't build the foundation, and you just want to get by, Dave Ramsey works really well, because what he's doing is he's paying down his debt. And it's another thing with the relationship with money. Why would you cut up your credit cards? Isn't it better to understand why you're overpaying, why you're overspending? Isn't it better to understand that you have a dopamine hit and you can control it? You can say, oh, well, time out. Instead of cutting them up, let me see why I'm getting that urge or that feeling to overspend. That's taking control. That's being financially intelligent, financially independent. What I would say is, if you're going to use debt, you break it down into the personal debt and business debt. I have zero personal debt. I've owned cars my entire life. I've never ever had a car payment. I was driving hand-me-downs in my mid 30s after my dad passed away. I got his car and then I got my mom's car. I just did not want to have a car payment, because to me that's personal debt. I've never ever once in my life had a balance on my credit card that I didn't pay the following month. Personal debt, I will lever my business side of the balance sheet to pay for my personal side of the balance sheet. So for me, we have hundreds of millions of dollars of debt on our real estate, but they are cash flowing assets. Their loan to values are in the 65 to 70%. So I'm not over levered, and I'm using that side of the balance sheet to pay for my personal lifestyle. I think if
Hmm.
Dave said it that way, that would make more sense.
Sure.
Your home at 3% interest rates on a mortgage, that's practically free money. If you
Free
want to
money.
pay it off a lot quicker, you can put on a 30-year amortization. And if you decide to pay it a lot quicker, you can pay it off a lot quicker. But I have no problems with that. I do have problems with personal debt, lines of credit. I've taken out home equity loans. I have a HELOC in my home right now for 800 grand, but I put that 800 grand into a deal that Jake and I bought a year ago. That deal is cash flowing a lot more than what my line of credit is costing me. And then in the next
Exactly.
18 months, I'm going to refi that deal, pull more money out of that deal than I put into the deal, and I'll pay off the line of credit. So I'm utilizing my debt to earn me more income. So understanding that is important. But I think everybody, from the financial intelligence standpoint, needs to understand their relationship with money, how they feel about money, how what investments work really well for them. Some people may think that real estate is too risky. Then don't invest in it if you're not going to sleep at night. But understand that you need to start off with the Dave Ramsey. You need to have 6 months set aside. You need to have an emergency fund. You need to have all your personal debt paid off. Once you have that and you have clarity, then you can start becoming a serious investor. You don't want to start investing money into an asset that you're not really sure of if you've got a lot of stuff going on here, a lot of stuff that's unclear, a lot of personal debt going on. Because if something happens with the business and you lose the business, how are you going to pay the personal off? So you need to understand both sides of the ledger and separate them between
Yeah.
personal and business debt.
And I think there's one exception if you're maybe younger, you don't have a family yet, is you can kind of combine that and actually go buy. So you have to live somewhere, right? We all
Yes.
have to live somewhere. Either you're
Oh,
paying
yes.
rent or you have a mortgage. So, if you're not sure, why don't you go buy a 2 to 4 unit, use
Yes.
bank financing to finance 96.5% of it, go live in the unit, and you could either pay the rent you were going to pay to yourself and have the tenants pay down majority of the mortgage. Now you're still working your W-2 job or whatever job
Yep.
you're in. You can now you can take home more of that paycheck. The tenant's paying down your mortgage, you're getting appreciation, and you're actually putting more money in your pocket. And also now you're in real estate. You've
Hmm.
accomplished so many things in one transaction. I think that's going back to like financial literacy and the relationship of money. And you do 3.5% down. I mean, it's the best way, in my opinion, to get in real estate. And I get some people have pushback on this. Well, I have kids and family, and I don't want to share walls with the tenant. And there are, certain situations for different, families. But I think if you are eligible to do that, I would 100% get started that way. Yeah.
So, Mike, when you say that I don't want to, I have children, my parents, we lived in a duplex.
Yep.
My uncle lived next door. We lived on the other side, and we had tenants downstairs. I remember one of the tenants was a piano teacher, and he'd be playing piano all times of the day. But do you know what that duplex allowed us to do? That duplex literally paid for all of our living expenses for 15 years. My mom had no mortgage payment and no taxes and no insurance. It was all paid from the tenant, and it allowed us to be able to build equity and to be able to buy the restaurant, and for her to buy additional properties. And if that's what you need to do, you need to sacrifice. Life is all about making choices for the long term. If you want to stay comfortable and pay more and have the convenience, that's great. Just understand that you're sacrificing your future in the next 3 to 5 years. For me, what you've described is something that's even more financially intelligent than what people really grasp. You're buying an asset with 3 or 4% of the equity. You are controlling 100% of that asset with only 3 or 4% of the money into that asset. How many other asset classes can you do that with? You're getting 100% of the benefits from it. It's an incredible way to get into the business itself. And for people starting out and saying, "Well, I don't want to," that's your decision. That's your choice. But who says you need to live there for more than 2 or 3 years? You may have built up enough equity in that property to be able to sell that property and then go buy a single family home with possibly a cottage that's detached, an accessory dwelling unit, whatever that looks like. But I think people get stopped before they even get started. Mark Twain has a great quote. It says, people don't get stopped by stuff that they do know. They get stopped by knowing about stuff that they know for sure that just ain't so. And that what that means basically is Mark Twain is saying you're not getting stopped because of stuff that you don't know. You're getting stopped because of things that you're assuming that you don't understand. You may think you need all this money to put down in a home. You may think that you can't buy a 2-unit or a 3-unit. That's just, we don't do that. You're making those assumptions, but those assumptions are faulty. So go out there and listen to other podcasts, how to buy the first home, whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. We make assumptions, and those assumptions a lot of times tend to be faulty. And then we hold on to those assumptions, and then we don't take actions based on those assumptions.
So good. So good. So true. Thank you. So, Gino, we're coming up on 30 minutes here. Where can people find more information about you?
If you want real estate, just go to jakeandgino.com. We have the podcast on there. If you want to reach out to me to get a free book, Wheel of Our Profits, the email is gino@jakeandgino.com. If you want to learn more about the family company, it's barbaro360.com. It's BARBARO360.com. Go on the website. You want to schedule a call with us. You want to download our Happy Money book. It's on there as well. Visit both of those sites.
Awesome. And one question I like to ask all of our guests here is, how do you spend your day? You have, all the time in the world, not all the time in the world, but you have a full day. How do you spend your day?
That is an excellent question. Every single day that I have is completely different. I'll either be podcasting, creating content. As you get older, you start understanding that you want to start designing your day or your life around things that really draw you, that fuel you, that energize you. And for me, I hope that I've shown through this podcast that getting on podcasts, sharing these stories really energizes me. That's where I want to spend the majority of my day, creating content, building a business with my family. The Barbaro 360 is really what we're leaning into right now. And also trying to teach people about legacy. Legacy is not just about financial capital. It's human capital and it's intellectual capital. And focusing on that and teaching people about legacy is where I love to spend a lot of time in my day right now.
Okay. So I'm gonna dig a little bit deeper. From the time you wake up, is there anything you do mentally, physically? And then
question.
you go into, maybe breakfast, time with your family, time with the kids.
Yes.
Then maybe you do the podcast, and then maybe you do some time blocking, and maybe you spend some time reading. Like, walk me through a day in the life of Gino.
I was at an event about a month ago, and I heard a speaker named he wrote the Miracle Morning. His name is Hal Elrod.
Oh yeah.
If you haven't read Miracle Morning, I would tell you have to read the book. It's a simple book. And most people are like, well, I'm not a morning person. You can get up 20 minutes before your morning. I spend about 30 minutes on the Miracle Morning. He's got an acronym called SAVERS.
Okay.
I like to scribe for a couple of minutes. I like to read for a couple of minutes. I like to meditate/pray for a couple of minutes. I like to go out, and I actually love to just sit down and write and spend about 30 minutes before anything. 7 to 7:30. 7:30, my kids are already up. I'm hanging out with them between 7:30 and 8:30. 8:30, the day starts, doing calls to lunchtime. Actually, I went to lunch with one of my kids today across the street, came back, and I'm jumping back on calls. But if you don't have a morning routine, and you don't have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, check out Hal Elrod's book, Miracle Morning. It will give you a framework on how to attack the day. Because if you are ready mentally, emotionally, physically to start the day off, you're going to have a much better result by the end of the day, as if you just wake up, grab a cup of coffee or an energy drink, and just hit the day running. That's not the way you want to start the day.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for your time, Gino. I appreciate everything. We'll link all your information in the show notes, and we'll talk again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
See you. Thank you for watching Sky's the Limit. We're always releasing new real estate content, so if there's something you want to hear, be sure to leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel.